All right, we are joined by Judo Crazy's own Oon Yeoh. How you doing, sir?
Hi, hi. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us. I'm a big fan of your work. Of course, for folks who are fans of combat sports, particularly judo, they know your website, judocrazy.com. If anyone's interested in learning more about judo, I recommend you check out this great website. Lots of great articles and resources, actually. And they're also on Facebook, of course. Lots of great
Yeah.
articles there. I have a lot of questions to ask you. Don't have much time, but let's dive right into it. I want to talk about the first theme I'm going to talk about are the new rules, of course.
Hmm.
Thus far, the new judo rules. Thus far, what are your overall thoughts about these new rules, and what do you like and what do you not like?
Okay, so when you're talking about the new rules, are you talking about the new slate of rules that were just introduced, or are you talking about
Correct.
the whole
Yes.
set of rules that have been introduced since 2010?
No, no, the new recent ones
The
as
most
of
recent
January.
ones, yeah.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
as of January.
I think the bombshell was the ban on reverse seonage. That
Right.
took everyone by surprise, and it came out of nowhere because nobody. I mean, nobody I knew thought of it as a dangerous technique. I mean, if anything, I felt the one-handed sode is a more dangerous technique than the reverse seonage. I mean, if you watch the IJF World Tour, I don't think you'll see many instances of people getting injured from a reverse seonage. I mean, occasionally some people's arms might get caught up and it gets a little bit hurt, but no serious injury, and it doesn't happen often. uh, you know, Injuries happen when you do osotogari. Injuries happen when you do uchimata. Injuries do happen in judo, and I think the incidences of injuries with reverse seonage is probably no higher than any other throw. So for them to ban the reverse seonage on the basis of that is dangerous, I think is not really well founded. I mean, they certainly didn't present any statistics to show how dangerous it is. So I think that was really a shocker and a disappointment.
Right, and I mean, just the visual alone, and it made for great highlight reel material. Right, it's a very dynamic, explosive move, and it looks very cool, I must say. But hey, I
It's
guess
very cool.
it totally is. The rules are the rules. I just wanted to ask you a follow up to that. Are there any observations you can share as to how these rules have benefited a particular approach or style to competing?
Well, I mean, we have to go back a little bit to the ban on leg grabs. That was probably the most consequential rule of all, and it's basically removed leg grabs from judo completely, right? Anything below the belt, you cannot touch with your hands. I mean, you can still use your legs to attack the legs, but you can't use your hands to attack the legs. And that's really changed judo a lot because a whole slew of techniques have been removed from judo. If you look at the gokyo, right, the canon of judo, and you look at the tewaza hand techniques, there are hardly any hand techniques left. There's ippon seonagi, taitoshi, seotoshi, and all the other stuff, the morotegaris, the katagurumas, the sukuinagis, all that's all been banned. And so there are hardly any tewaza left. And um and so it's really changed judo a lot. And initially I was upset with that because when I was a competitor, I used leg grabs as well. And I think leg grabs are just part of judo. But having seen how judo has progressed over the past decade without leg grabs, I mean, I would say that definitely judo is far more upright today than it was in the 90s, and in the early 2000s when people were leg grabbing. So aesthetically, it's you could say it's better. It's more upright and it favors more upright judo. So it's taken judo a little bit more towards, I guess, the Japanese ideal of a more upright judo rather than the wrestling type of judo.
Right. And according to, I'm just going to read a quote here. According to Vladimir Barta, this is the IGF head sports director, and I quote, the principle of the rules is to protect athletes and the sport as a whole, while promoting judo to be more dynamic, more attractive for the public and the media. Question is, in your opinion, will these new rule sets, will they make the sport more dynamic and attractive to the public and media? And if so, how do you think this objective or goal is going to be measured and assessed?
Well, in terms of making it more attractive, I guess you could make an argument that upright judo is more attractive than the leg grabbing type of judo. You could make an argument that aesthetically that's more beautiful, but even so, I think judo is really not a spectator sport. The only people who really like to watch judo videos are judo people, right? People who are judo crazy, like you and me. We like to watch videos, right? But
Right.
for the average person, or even just a very recreational judo player, they don't like to watch, the IGF World Tour. It's too boring for them. So I don't. I think that no matter what you do, you can try to make judo more attractive, but it'll never be the kind of spectator sport that football or soccer is. It'll never be. It'll never really be a spectator sport. The nature of the sport is such that with all that gripping and all that, it'll be boring for the average person.
Right. So obviously to target that the general public as far as that demographic, it's more challenging. But over the
Very.
years, do you think it's evolved to become more and more entertaining? Because I wouldn't say, I think your statement in regards to it potentially being generally, as you describe it, boring, I think that applies to, unfortunately, to a lot of combat sports. Let's face it. It's not just judo, right? If you're familiar and watch any Brazilian jiu-jitsu, even freestyle and Greco-Roman wrestling, like, there's different layers of different types and profiles of fans, right? There's fans who've grown up practicing the sport recreationally and competing, possibly moving all the way to international community, and then there's different audiences is what I'm saying. And I get that some people are more attached to it and some people are more diehard committed fans. But it's interesting, though, because I think all of these sports have the same sort of equal challenge, right? And when you're trying to promote it to the everyday viewer, and someone like yourself who's competed previously, right? It's you have a different relationship and different connection to it. But I think it's still, maybe I have a bias. Yes, I do have a bias. I still find it very entertaining, because there's so many layers to the game, and it being such a global sport, right? You have so many different styles coming into play and personalities and weight division. I know you feel the same as well, ultimately. But
definitely.
I just think the task of trying to promote not promote, but to tap into the general public audience is very, very hard. I think mixed martial arts got its popularity in mainstream North America primarily due to reality television, right? It wasn't until they introduced reality television, they merged reality television and professional mixed martial arts and sports entertainment, then it became accessible, right, to all of us. But anyways, I want to move on just to follow up. If you could suggest or recommend 2 new rules, what would they be and why?
Okay, rules. Well, I mean, if really I could have my way, I would reintroduce the reverse yonagi. I wouldn't ban that, because I really think it's a beautiful throw. As you said, it's dynamic and it's innovative and
will attract the general audience. If you're not familiar, you know what I mean?
So.
If you're not familiar, you'll watch that and you're like, wow, that is incredible, man.
Totally, it's a crowd pleaser. Whenever you show, and I've done quite a lot of videos for Judo Crazy, and when I did clips, highlights of reverse yonagi, the views, the hits go through the roof. People love it. People love it because it's such a beautiful throw. It really is, and so that will be one thing. And I guess the other thing that I probably would introduce is something to do with gripping. I mean, recently with the new rules, there is a slight relaxation on gripping. For example, now you can use two hands to break the grip. Previously, you had to use only one hand, and now you're allowed to use two hands to break the grip, with the condition that you quickly impose your own grip and that you engage, right? So I think that's an improvement that they allow that. But and they also give slightly more time for you to set up your throw when you're using an unorthodox grip, like a cross grip, right? Previously, the language was that it must be immediate. So once you grab it, this cross grip or this any unorthodox grip, you have to throw straight away. There's no time for even a setup, or else you get a shido. Now they're going to give you a little bit more leeway, but I would personally like to see even more leeway. I think that judo would be richer and more interesting if these type of unorthodox grips were allowed, to go on and to be practiced, and rather than to be discouraged, because by imposing, I mean, it is a fact that the rules are such that it encourages the traditional grip. It encourages the sleeve lapel traditional grip. If you have a sleeve lapel grip, and you have up to 45 seconds to set up a throw. That was the language, 45 seconds to set up a throw. In contrast, if you have a cross grip or any kind of unconventional grip, the language was that you have to throw immediately. I mean, immediately versus 45 seconds is huge. It's a lifetime. It's a big difference. It's very clear what type of gripping they are promoting, that they want to encourage. But I think, the unconventional grips, the Russian grips, the Georgian grips, the cross grip, the Korean grips, these are all interesting grips, and that you should not discourage it. I mean, you should allow people to do it and give them more time with those grips. I mean, the argument against that is that those grips are very dominating, and when somebody has that imposes that grip, it's hard for the uke, the person on the receiving end, to do anything. But my argument would be that, if you're an international fighter, you're a top class fighter, you should be able to handle any grip. Whatever grip somebody tries to impose upon you, you should be able to handle it. Whether it's a Georgian grip or a Korean grip, you should be able to handle it if you're a top class player. So no problem. That's my view. So I would relax the rules on gripping if I had my way.
Yeah, no, it sounds like very interesting rules. If you were able to suggest those, and I think it enables, as far as the gripping, orthodox gripping. I think having that unorthodox style that comes from various parts of the world only enriches the potential for excitement and real challenges, because, as you mentioned, these are the best of the best competitors who are representing their countries, you know what I mean, in the world. So they should be able, as you said, to handle just about anything in theory.
Yeah.
Now we're just going to quickly move on to a second theme here, the most recent Summer Games, which was in Tokyo 2020. Well, technically 2021, of course. As far as judo at the recent Summer Games, in your opinion, what are the top three major stories or significant takeaway from the games?
Okay. I mean, one obvious major story was that France beat Japan in the mixed team competition, which I think it was a surprise. Everybody expected Japan to win, right. So that was a big surprise. And the other big story was, of course, Japan set out to get a lot of gold medals, and it did, and they managed to. Well, they didn't underperform. Let's put it this way.
Right.
They really did. I mean, Kosei Inoue, the coach for the men's team. I mean, he produced 5 gold medals. I mean, that's incredible, and that's going to be a tough, benchmark for Keiji Suzuki to meet. To produce another 5 gold medals. Right. That'll be really hard. And so yeah, Japan was still dominant, in spite of the fact that the rest of the world has has improved in their judo, and judo is now truly a global sport. But Tokyo 2020 showed that Japan is still very, very dominant. And I guess I guess maybe the third story would be one that of I would say that really dominant players can also be beaten, and so I mean, on the one hand, you have people like Shohei Ono, who seems unbeatable, but don't forget, in the team championship he got beaten.
Correct.
He got beaten by a German, right? That was the team championships, of course. And of course, in the individual championships, there were a few upsets, like Daria Bilodit was the top favorite, but she got beaten. And Kalmendi was, you could say, was a top prospect as well, and she also got beaten. So at one time, certainly when they were at their peak, they seemed to be unbeatable, right? And yet, even the mighty will fall. So I think that those are the interesting stories from Tokyo 2020.
Interesting. As we head towards the next games here, which are only 2 years away, Paris 2024. Based on what you've seen so far in terms of international competition, which athletes are you closely observing on the road towards Paris 2024?
Well, Shohei Ono is obviously a very interesting person to follow, because he's so dominant. He still is very dominant, and he's been described as pound for pound the greatest fighter today, right? Wow. That's how he's often described by the IJF, and
what do you think about that? Do you agree with that?
It's hard to disagree with it. He is very dominant. Right. He is very, very dominant, and the last time I saw somebody that dominant, I would say it was Koga, from right. The 1990s. Koga had that kind of aura of dominance. When he stepped onto the mat, it's like, okay, he's a cut above everybody else, and Ono does have that kind of aura, I have to admit, and so yeah, I'll be watching him very closely. And also, he's a double Olympic champion, so if he wins another gold medal in Paris 2024, then he would match Nomura's three Olympic gold medals, which right. Which would make him actually the greatest, because he's also I can't remember how many world titles Ono already has. Does he have 3 world titles? He certainly has at least 2, and so that and Nomura has 1. So Nomura has 3 Olympic titles and 3 Olympic gold medals and 1 world title. So if Ono also has 3 Olympic gold medals and more world titles, I've lost track of how many world championships he's won. But if Ono wins that 3 Olympic, he would surpass Nomura as the greatest. So right. So I think a lot of people will be watching that. And the other person, of course, is Teddy Riner. Teddy Riner failed to get his 3rd gold medal in Tokyo, and he's trying again in Paris 2024, and it'll be really challenging because he's getting older,
right?
And then again, that aura of invincibility that he once had, I would say he had that at one time, right? Totally unbeatable. And now he's been beaten, right? Not just in Tokyo 2020, but before that, Kageura beat him in the Paris Grand Slam.
Right.
I think he also lost in a team championships in France to another Frenchman. So he's no longer seen as unbeatable. So it'll be interesting, because he'll be hungry. He wants that 3rd gold medal,
right.
And it's in Paris.
Exactly.
And he's hungry, but yet he's getting older, and clearly not in his prime anymore. So it'll be interesting to see. But yet he's Teddy Riner, and he'll still be a top contender. So it'll be interesting to see whether he gets that 3rd gold medal or Ono gets that 3rd gold medal, or maybe both of them will get it.
Right. It's exciting. I mean, just based on those few names, it makes for a lot of interesting stories. Do you have any other individuals?
Yeah. You mentioned one. You asked me for three, right?
Right.
You know, off the top of my head, I guess Bilodin is interesting. Bilodin is interesting because she's a double world champion, which she won in her teens, right? And but at 48 kilos, and now she's moved up to 57.
Right.
I mean, she's bypassed 52. She's moved up to 57.
Mhm.
On the one hand, that's good because now she can eat and she doesn't have to starve and be so skinny and miserable,
Right.
with all that dieting, and she can
Sure.
have full power, right? On the one hand, but on the other hand, it takes some getting used to. When you move up just one weight category, what more two? So it'll be interesting to see whether over the next 2 years she's able to make that transition into a 57 kilo fighter very smoothly. We'll have to wait and see. But she's even at 57 kilos, she's still tall. She's
Right.
still taller than most of her opponents, so she can use her legs for sankaku and ochi, and so she still has the she still has a physical advantage, I would say, in terms of height, in terms of reach, and if she's not dieting so much anymore, she can grow strong, and be a strong 57 kilo. It's just whether she can really get used to fighting other players who are that strong as well, because she's used to fighting 48 kilo fighters.
Right. I'm going to move on to a question here about Tatsuru Saito, who recently won the All Japan Championship and the selection for the Worlds. What are your, generally speaking, what are your thoughts on him? Is he the next big thing for the heavyweight division? I mean, he's certainly big. He's almost, I think he's 6'3", that's 193 centimeters. And I think he weighs like 150 kilos. That's 340 plus. If around there. He's a big competitor. What are your thoughts on him? And of course, he's second generation. So
yeah, I mean, great pedigree, right? His father was a great champion. But I haven't seen much of him. He's about 20 years old. Yeah, right. And he hasn't had a lot of international competition, although he won the Baku Grand Slam. I think it was he won that, but he hasn't had a lot of international exposure. So I'm not as familiar with his judo. I saw what he did at the All Japan Championships, and he's a big Uchimata guy or Sotogari guy. Looks dominant, very imposing, but and yes, he could be, of course, the next great thing from Japan. But if you watch his matches, I mean, his fight against Harasawa was won by a decision. He didn't really beat Harasawa decisively with a big throw or anything like that. So I'm not sure if that's because they fought each other before in Japan and maybe they're used to each other. I'm not sure if that's the case, but I guess it would have been more impressive if he had thrown Harasawa for Ippon rather than win by a decision. And Harasawa, well, he's fought in a lot of international competitions, and he's he's the guy that lost to Riner, right?
Yeah.
In 2000 and was it 2012 that he lost to Riner, right? In London. Do you have that?
We should know this. Should we not know this here?
I think maybe I should just check it up real quickly.
Yeah, let's just quickly Google it.
Judo Insight.
Let's see who gets it first.
My internet is too slow.
Wait, aren't you in Malaysia? Do they have great internet connection?
Yeah, but my computer here is a little bit slow. Okay, let me see.
No, he in 2012 he lost to Alexander McKellen from Russia.
Oh, it's McKellen. All right. So was it
16?
Oh, Mikhailin. That's right. Let me see. Head to head. Here we go. All right. In 2016, it was Harasawa.
Right.
It was 2016. Right. Yeah. So Riner beat him. um, and so yeah, it was an important match. Harasawa versus uh, Saito, because Harasawa is also a big guy.
Right.
Yeah, I mean he did throw Kageura, but Kageura is a small guy, and a lot of the guys that he'll be fighting internationally will be quite big as well. I mean Teddy Riner, if he fights Teddy Riner, is a big guy, right? And yeah, and um, Kageura, very skillful fighter, and of course he famously beat Rene, right? Very skillful, but he's a small guy. He's small for heavyweight, and most of the people that you'll see in the heavyweight category won't be that small. So Saito will have to be able to throw the likes of Harasawa and big guys if he wants to match the legacy of his father, which is 2 Olympic gold medals, and that's a tall order. But it'll be interesting. I mean, he's certainly, I guess, more interesting than most of the other Japanese heavyweights that you have right now.
Right, and I don't want to get in a. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I'm surprised on the flip side of things. Not surprised, but with his size and his presence and all that he hasn't been scooped up by some pro wrestling.
Sumo
or pro wrestling in Japan, because as I mentioned, he's huge, man, and he's only 20, and I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. But I want to move on to a topic. We spoke about Riner, and I saw recently that he was on social media that there was pictures of him training in Brazil, cross training, doing a lot of newaza, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, I suppose. Yeah, there was some of that. What are your thoughts on that? Can we expect to see him do, as you mentioned, he's getting older, he's I guess he's no longer unbeatable. He is beatable. He is human after all.
Yeah.
and everyone, I'm a big fan of his. I think anyone who's a fan of judo can appreciate his contribution to the sport. Are we going to see him utilize more groundwork as he's getting older and still competing?
Well, he's been training a lot. Besides, you mentioned Brazil, he was recently spotted in Mongolia as well. He was at a training camp in Mongolia, right? So doing
how recent was this? Sorry,
I saw it this week.
Okay,
I saw it this week. Yeah, so I guess he was just there recently. Right. So he's going around the world and he's training. Well, first to answer your question about newaza, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, Riner's newaza usually was a follow-up from a throw or a failed throw, or our opponent going down on the ground and he'll just clamp on, and he's never been known to do very complex or sophisticated newaza moves, like Hamada in Japan, or Neil Adams, of yesteryears, the Neil Adams rolling Juji Gatami, or Mark Huizinga with his famous Huizinga roll and all that. These complex, he's not been known to do that kind of complex newaza. When he did newaza, it was usually following from a throw, and straight away he would clamp down on them, or if they fell down, he would just roll them over. And he didn't do very, very complex newaza, and I don't expect him to. Not a lot of heavyweights do newaza, right? Lucas Krapalik does a lot of newaza, but not a lot of heavyweights do newaza. They rather throw, and I expect that to still be the same for Teddy Riner. But the main thing the main comment I have about Teddy Riner is this. If you look at his approach to the Tokyo Olympics, it was to avoid competitions. He avoided fighting, and there was one year, I can't remember which year now it was, but he didn't even compete for that whole year.
Right.
There was one year where he didn't compete for the whole year.
Was that due to injuries? Sorry to interrupt.
No. I don't think so. Well, let me see. 2018, he didn't fight at all in 2018. And I remember in 2018, I was at the World Championships. I think the the 2018 World Championships was in Baku, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I happened to I met several of the French coaches, and I happened to be on a bus with Stéphane Trenou, who was head of the head coach, I guess, at that time, head of I think performance or technical development or something like that. He was he was basically the head, and I remember talking to him, and I said, and asking him, I said, Teddy Riner, you know, the fact that he's not competing, is it because of injury? And then he said, no, it's a strategy he decided, he adopted. And I said, but was this a strategy prescribed to him by his coaches, or is it him? And he said, no, it's him. He thinks that he should just, you know, compete less. And, you know, obviously he thought that that was the right strategy to make himself less accessible, I guess, to others, and just to appear in a few selected competitions. But obviously that didn't work, right? I mean, you know, the few times when he competed prior to the Olympics, he looked sluggish. His techniques were not sharp. You know, he was a bit slower than usual. His Uchimata didn't really seem to be working anymore.
Right.
And of course, you know, and he got beaten by Kageura, and he got beaten in the Olympics. So I think that shows that his strategy of not competing so much, it certainly didn't pay off for Tokyo 2020. And there's 2 years left. Let's see how often he competes, you know, in the next 2 years. I think if he continues with that strategy of competing only a few times a year, I don't think that that's going to lead to success. I think, you know, he needs to compete a lot more just to get, you know, I mean, when you don't compete, you get rusty, right? He's obviously going for training camps, and he is, you know, he's going for training camps, and he is training, but training is different from competing.
Right.
And you know, even in the lead up to Tokyo 2020, I mean, he obviously was training. He just wasn't competing a whole lot. And I think that made him rusty. You know, he became slower and not as sharp.
Yeah, it's interesting because I saw him at the Montreal Grand Prix 2019 here in Montreal, Canada, and it was spectacular to see him. He was, you know, the crowd was very excited, and it was a very diverse crowd, and it was a packed house, lots of enthusiasm from the Montreal fans, as you can imagine, and they were excited to see him. Obviously, he placed first there, but it's interesting, you know, as you say, maybe, you know, that wasn't the best strategy, and you know, I there's probably more to the story in terms of injuries. I mean, you asked the
well, it wasn't just Treno. I asked a few other French coach. Well, is it mainly because of injuries? And they said it really wasn't. You know, it wasn't. I mean, he had minor injuries here and there, but the main reason for, you know, being absent from competition was more of a strategy. I mean, the rationale for the strategy, we don't know. I mean, you know, I'm not privy to his thinking, and he's never really articulated why. But it was a strategy, and it didn't pay off. You know.
Right. I want to transition now to a set of other questions that I have for you. What are your thoughts on the Canadian national judo team, and who's your favorite Canadian competitor? Obviously, well, you love the Canadian team.
Yeah, obviously. No, I mean, I think that Nicholas Gill has done a fantastic job in you know, just really raising the level of Canadian judo. I mean, it's I mean, it's ever since he took over, you know, Canadian judo has been rising and rising and rising, and you have a lot of, you know, really top international athletes now, you know, really good. And you've got several players who are, I think, very stylish players, you know, really good judo. But I guess the two most interesting Canadian players, I would say, it would be Jessica Klimkait and Krista Deguchi, you know, 57 kilos. Right. Well, both of them are world champions, you know.
Right.
And different styles, very different styles. Deguchi is a little bit more, well, you know, she is Japanese, and it's more Japanese judo. Klimkait is a drop player, you know, drop senagi player. And and the dynamic, you know, between the two of them is really interesting because, you know, for for a long time, it was assumed that Deguchi would be the one going to the Olympics, and then it turned out that Klimkait was the one that went to the Olympics. And Klimkait recently became world champion, and the momentum seems to be with her now, rather than Deguchi. So this reversal of fortune is kind of interesting. It'll be interesting to see if Deguchi gets back on top. But I would say Jessica Klimkait is really an interesting player. I mean, for a variety of reasons. I mean, the fact that she could rely almost exclusively on drop techniques, drop sode, drop seonagi, almost only that. I mean, she does ouchi occasionally, and she does have other techniques, but it's mainly drop, right? And she relies on it almost exclusively, and she still gets everybody with it. Nobody seems to be able to stop it. They know it's coming, they know she drops, but they can't stop it. So that's interesting. And the other interesting thing that I've noticed about her is that in previous years she didn't do a whole lot of newaza.
Right.
Yeah, she was not a newaza player. But lately her newaza has gotten very good. She used a lot of newaza in the Olympics and in recent competitions. So she's really transitioned into a newaza player, I would say. Really good.
I think you've written about that recently, right? On judocrazy.com.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to see more Canadian athletes on Judo Crazy. Of course, no, I'm just kidding. But no, I'm not kidding. No, all good. My next question for you is, who are the top 3 best newaza specialists, be it male or female, we should be watching carefully?
Okay. Well, one of the best newaza specialists in the world today is Hamada, obviously, and she's just she's able to do strangles, she's able to do armlocks, she's able to do pins. She's able to do everything, and it's almost like once you're on the ground with her, you've lost. Yeah, so she's probably the best newaza exponent in the world, male or female. So it's always very interesting to watch. So as an individual from Japan, I would say, if I had to identify an individual from Japan, I would say it would be Hamada. But in general, the women's team in Japan is very strong in newaza. I think you notice that. All of them, especially the lighter weights, are very, very strong. Utabe is very strong. In newaza, all of them are very, very strong. But Hamada really stands out among all the Japanese. So that's one. Another person obviously very good in newaza is Bilodit. She doesn't do a whole lot of techniques, but she does that sankaku really well, and it's very hard to avoid. Right. Although interestingly, in the recent Europeans, in her first round match, she didn't do sankaku but an arm lock. So that's kind of interesting, because normally she does sankaku.
Right.
So maybe she's expanding her range, but she's very good in newaza, and with her long legs and everything, that I think she can use newaza to her advantage in the 57 kilo category.
Right.
If I had to name one more person, probably Howell from Britain, who recently won the European title as well. British girls have always been good at newaza too. They're like the Japanese. There's that long history of very good newaza from British female players, and she's good at newaza, and so the French girls are good in newaza too. Yeah, but I would say, if you wanted me to identify an individual, I would say Howell from Great Britain. I'm impressed with her newaza.
Right. It's an interesting topic. I want to actually talk to you more in the future about the topic of groundwork and all that, because I think it's one aspect of the game, that grappling in general, that is on this side of the globe very popular. As you can imagine, the groundwork, be it judo, jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, sambo, based groundwork is very fascinating topic, I find. So I'm hoping to talk to you about that in more
Yeah, I mean one thing I found very interesting about newaza is that when it comes to judo, uh, you see a lot of the women doing it. You know, if you notice, you asked me to
right.
name, and they're all women.
I was sorry, I was going to ask you about that, but particularly because I know you've written about that in the past as well on the Japanese team. They're known for that on the women's side, whereas the
very
men,
good. But the men don't really do newaza. You know, they don't really
see
like
it. You don't see it, and you're assuming it must be. Obviously, they have that arsenal of
there are different theories for that. Well, I knew one guy who had his theory, which is he said that the men, realized that. I mean, I don't agree with this theory, but there was one guy I spoke to who said, well, the men realized that newaza is very tiring, so they want to reserve their energy for the throws. I don't know. I don't think that's the reason, but I don't know what's the reason, but definitely there was, it's very obvious that in Japan, the women are very good in newaza, and the men don't really like to do it. They might be good at it, but they don't really like to do it. And so yeah, that's. But if you ask me to name a newaza specialist today, that's male, it's hard for me to think of any off the top of my head. I mean, in previous years, you had people like Neil Adams, obvious newaza guy. You had Kazuhiko Kashiwazaki from Japan.
Right.
Very, famous newaza guy. But among the players today, not many really specialize in newaza. The Spanish players are quite good at newaza, but it's hard to find many current male players who you could say is really outstanding in newaza in the way that Hamada is.
Right. And in the past, there was also Kanto from Brazil.
Oh yes, yeah. Very famous.
Yeah, and he gets a lot. It's interesting because he gets a lot of, I guess, people also reference him on the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu side as someone who was very successful in newaza as it comes to international judo competition. So it's an interesting topic. But
and you had Jimmy Pedro from the United States,
right,
very good at newaza. Travis Stevens. So sure. there was in the past, but sure. Currently is there's not nobody that obviously comes to mind when you if you ask me male newaza player, but females there's a lot. Yeah,
it's an interesting topic. I'm sure someone could do a PhD research on that. Seriously, or even a documentary. But I'm going to have to take a pause, and we can reconnect for the next portion of the interview. Right. All right. Our next question for you is: who are your top 3 best coaches out there representing and producing winners in judo?
You're talking about current, right? Current coaches.
Correct, yes.
Not past coaches. Okay. So current coaches, I mean, an obvious name would be Draitan Kuka from Kosovo. Very obvious from the results that he's produced. In the course of 2 Olympics, he's produced 3 Olympic champions. And, Kosovo is a tiny country, war-torn country that has very little resources. And he's managed to produce 3 Olympic gold medalists. And I remember after Nora Jakova and Distria Krasniki won Olympic gold medals, apparently Yasuhiro Yamashita, the great Yasuhiro Yamashita from Japan, said, Japan has a new rival, and it's Kosovo. Wow. I'm not sure if that's true, but I read somewhere that he said that. I won't be surprised if he said that, and so it's remarkable, to be able to produce 2 Olympic gold medalists from the same, essentially the same dojo, right? But they all operated out of his dojo, which is the Ippon Judo Club. Now, with the success of these 3 Olympic champions and his success, apparently in Kosovo there's a national judo training center. They've built, I mean, obviously when you have success, money pours in and there's resources, and so they've been able to build a national training center in Kosovo. But before that, all these champions came out of his dojo, right? And so it's not like Kosovo has a lot of judokas. Yes, now a lot of people play judo because of the success that they've had, and it's attracted a lot of people. But in terms of very high level judokas, I mean, at the time of Kelmendi, there weren't a lot of high level judokas.
Right.
At the time, there were only this small handful of top level judokas from his judo cup, and he's managed to produce remarkable results, with that small group of people.
Right, and it's interesting. Sorry, go ahead, continue.
Yeah. So that's one, Kuka, and not sure if you want to ask any follow-up questions about that.
Yeah. No, it's interesting too, because I think he obviously himself was a former competitor, right?
Yes.
And there's a whole backstory to that, and the IGF produces some really cool videos and that tell those stories, and I think fans can always appreciate that. But I believe it's fair to say that judo's become Kosovo's national or international sport, right? If you look at
not surprisingly, not surprisingly, I mean, we've seen that happen a lot in other countries in the past. When a champion, a hero emerges in that small country.
Like and Slovenia would be similar to
Slovenia. I mean, you could say Israel is another place.
Oh,
and,
yes.
And Mongolia as well.
Right.
Where they have a champion, and then suddenly the sport becomes very popular.
Mm-hmm.
It happened too with well, this goes back quite a way, but Peter Seisenbacher from Austria.
Right.
Unfortunately, he's a little bit of a disgraced personality, because he's he had some sexual abuse allegations, and he's in jail now apparently. But he was a double Olympic champion, and and Austria's judo hero. And judo was not that popular in Austria until he came along and won an Olympic gold.
Right.
And then he subsequently got 2 Olympic golds, and judo became this popular sport, and judo clubs mushroomed all over the country because they had this hero.
Right.
Yeah, and so you do see that happening, and certainly in Kosovo, I mean, judo is the sport,
Right. It's interesting because I think it goes back to earlier in the conversation we're talking about how this sport is global, and every region, almost every country that's represented, once they have established that quote unquote that achievement of having someone make the podium, you begin to see how it impacts the country's overall performance. More kids start to train in judo, and then they continuity, they become winners themselves. So who else would you say?
Okay, another obvious one would be Shani Hershko from Israel. Israel's female team coach, head coach. And his first major success was with Yarden Gerbi, who won a world title in 2013, using a very unusual choke. Now famously known as the Gerbi choke. Yeah. Are you familiar with that?
I am. I believe, is it not similar to what we know?
It's the Peruvian necktie.
Yeah. I was gonna say in Nogi and
it's a Peruvian necktie, and so it was legal at the time. It wasn't illegal. Let's put it this way. And she did it, and she won it with style, and so that was his first major success. And now he's had a lot of successes, producing medalists in the female team. And again, Israel is a small country, but judo has become a very popular sport there. And they have this one central place called Wingate Institute, where all the national players are concentrated and they train together. And he's developed a system that works. They're producing champions, and small country. And he's famous for saying, you might have seen this IJF produced clip where they interview a few different coaches, and he's famous for saying that we're a small country, we don't have the resources of Japan, we can't train like the Japanese, we cannot try to emulate the Japanese, we have to do our own way, because we are different conditions than in Japan. And it's true. I mean, Jimmy Pedro says the same thing. I think one of the mistakes that many coaches and maybe many clubs in many countries make is that they look at Japan and they say, well, Japan's obviously a great judo nation. Let's do everything they do, and let's try to be like them. But you're not like Japan, right? You go, a Japanese top level club will have 50 black belts on the mat. you don't have those kind of bodies available, capable bodies. It's a different condition. I mean, in most judo clubs, you struggle to have three capable bodies to do randori with, so you have to find your own way. And Sheni Hershko has obviously developed his own way to develop these Israeli female players, and he's had the success that to prove that his system works.
If I can ask just a follow-up question on that, obviously Israeli judo is very, very dynamic. Very entertaining. There's always big throws, there's always action, and a lot of passion.
Yeah.
Which is a win-win across the board. How, in terms of what's the subtle difference or differences, would you say, if you were to compare what you've seen coming out of Kosovo vis-a-vis what's come out of Israel stylistically? How would you compare the both? If I can put you on the spot and ask.
Okay. Well, I think first of all, Kosovo and Israel, they're actually the judo teams. They're actually quite close, and the Israeli team has helped the Kosovans a lot. They help Garmamie a lot. They help, right. And a lot of the Kosovans, when they go to Israel for training and rehabilitation and things like that. I think when Garmamie was injured, she got a lot of rehabilitation in Israel. So they work quite closely, and I think there's a certain recognition that, hey, look, we're both two small countries. Two small countries with right. big judo programs and so on. I think. So when you see the difference, I think that both are probably not overly wedded to this, Japanese system. They're not. Right. They're not. Whereas in many places around the world, there's that legacy of the Japanese system, and they try to follow the Japanese system, and that's not the case in Kosovo and Israel. Judo is a sport, and for them is very practical, and it's about what works. Right. I think one major difference is that Israel has success with both men and women. Right. Kosovo is mainly the women. They've got one male player, Akil Jakova, who's really right. good. Right. But
I think you've written about him, right?
Yes. But they don't really have that many successful male players, whereas Israel has a lot of fantastic male players who can really throw, right? Like you said, really dynamic, right? Shmailov, Tal Flicker, all those guys can throw big,
Right.
Yeah, and so I guess also in terms of the not only depth but breadth. Israel now, although it's a small country, has breadth in judo. They have top players in almost every category. They've got good players in almost every category. Right. Kosovo is much more, just a few selected players in a few selected categories. Growing, of course, and it'll probably change in the next 5-10 years. But Israel is definitely right now has more breadth.
Right. If I can follow up in terms of the coaches, and I don't know how much interaction you've had with them, or if you've interviewed them much. How stylistically, how would you compare, these two coaches from Kosovo and from Israel? If I know it's a tough one to answer there.
Yeah, I can't claim to know them very well. I mean, in fact, Driton Kuka, I've only interviewed him, and I don't really, I've not interacted much with him. Sheni Hershko, I kind of know. I can't say I know him well, but I kind of know because actually, interestingly, he's a fan of my work, Judo Crazy, and so
I'm not surprised, man. I think a lot of I'm a fan. I think a lot of people are. It's awesome content. Sorry, continue.
So I've interacted with him a little bit more, and asked him, and I think so a lot of what I'm going to tell you is based on perception rather than intimate personal knowledge. I can't claim to know them well or beyond just interviewing and talking to them. But from what I know, talking to them and also talking to players, is that Drayton Kuka is a very he's a hard ass coach. Really strict. For a long time, the girls were not allowed to have social media accounts. So they were like, no social media, no Facebook, no Instagram. They were very strict,
But it's
similar
good.
to the
It's sorry to interrupt, but it's good for to disconnect from social media. As many people have said, that there's unfortunately, it's not the most
yeah.
positive space in terms of
Yeah.
one's mental
Well, I
health
mean,
as well.
he's produced results. So
Right.
in terms of his effectiveness as a coach, there's no questioning that.
Right.
But he's just very strict in that sense,
Sure.
And so similar to the Slovenian coach. The Slovenian coach is exactly the same way. And
I think I'm frozen.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
back.
frozen.
I'm back.
All right, can you hear me? Yeah.
Sorry, yeah,
So he's a hard ass, strict disciplinarian. If when you watch movies and you see this hard ass drill sergeant,
Right,
in the Marines, he's something like
Sure.
that. He's a hard ass guy,
Right.
strict. I think Shaney, my perception is that he's not such a hard ass coach. I compared to all the girls have social media accounts and they're
Right.
active on social media and
Right.
things like that. So it's not like oh, no social media, no and sort of like he just the Kosovan coach is a lot more in controlling of his players.
Mhm.
I say the approach is more of a controlling type than
Right.
let's say the Israeli, which I think that it's a more Western approach, if I can use that
Yeah,
that more Western sporting approach
Right.
than the hardcore authoritarian type of approach.
Right.
But there's no denying that both of them produce results.
Right.
Both of them produce results. It may be different methodologies, but they produce results.
For you personally, I'm going to ask you for a third coach, but
Yeah.
in general, because you yourself are a coach, of course, right?
Yes.
What's your approach to coaching, if I can ask?
Okay, I'm very sports oriented, so I don't care about tradition too much. I mean, of course, we use Japanese terms, we bow, we follow the basic etiquette of judo, but basically, I approach judo the way that perhaps a wrestling coach would approach training. And to
Right.
me, it's a sport. How do we achieve the results? So I just to give you an example. This may be a little bit controversial, but you know why it's uchikomi, right?
Right.
Have you repetitive drills, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like for example, I do use uchikomi when a player is first learning a technique. But once they've learned the technique, once they've understood how to enter into the technique, I don't do uchikomi anymore. But
What? You don't?
so yeah.
I'm
so,
sure.
yeah.
Sorry, I'm sure right now some people are unfollowing your page. No, kidding.
No, but that's heresy in many Japanese clubs, Japanese oriented clubs. They'll do uchikomi for an hour, and so for me it's just like uchikomi is useful for learning the entry into the technique, but once you've learned the technique, it's kind of useless. So we do other drills. We do situational drills. We do a lot of randori, sparring. We do a lot of nagikomi, actual throws and things like that. So I don't follow tradition for the sake of tradition. Neither do I discard tradition. I mean, if there's a traditional technique or a traditional approach that works, it actually works, then we'll do it. I'm not anti-traditional or anti-classical, but if it doesn't work, then we'll do something that works.
Right.
So my approach is very sports oriented. It's not I don't care about whether something is traditional or not. I care about whether something works or not.
That's
my approach.
I appreciate that. I think I know where you're coming from with that. Wouldn't it be fair to say that there's so many different communities or different sort of outlooks on this approach? Like for some folks are just recreationalists. They you know what I mean? They enjoy the traditional aspect and they might see the value of the sports side, of course, but for them they're more focused on the tradition, the proper technique and the kata and all that.
I mean, some people like kata, yeah, exactly. So it depends what you're doing judo for. For some people it's just exercise, recreation. For some people, it's even a social thing, you know, coming to the
Right.
club and meeting friends.
Right.
And that's very different from somebody who wants to win a gold medal in a national championships, you know.
Sure.
So when I gave you that answer, I was talking in response to training my competitors.
Right.
I also have recreational players, and
Of course.
my approach is very is quite different there. You know, it's
Right.
quite different there.
Right.
Yeah, but when I answered your question, it was in regard to how I train competitors.
Right.
Okay, so you wanted to me to name 3 coaches. The third one is a coach who I don't know personally. I've never interviewed, but you know, I've observed from afar. Is KG Suzuki, who's just been appointed to replace Kosei Inoue as the men's national coach.
Right.
And of course, my observations of him is more of him as an athlete, and he was a superb athlete. I mean, he was a superb athlete, and you know, based on what I've seen him say about his approach to coaching, where you know he's when he was appointed, he said that he's not going to try to mold the players in a certain way, but you know, to look at their own personal characteristics and try to help them blossom. So I think that's a very positive thing. That's a very it's not a top-down authoritarian approach. It's like you must do it my way. You know, it's more of it's very open, and I think that that's good. And also, I think, you know, he's seen the success that Inoue has had with the men's team, you know, and he certainly doesn't want to disappoint, and he wants to at least live up to that, right? At least get 5 gold medals, you know, at least, you know, if not more. So I don't think he's going to mess too much around with the formula. You know what? I'm sure he's seen what Inoue has put in place, and what the players are used to. I don't think he's going to mess too much with it. He might tweak the formula a little bit and, you know, put his own little spin on it, but he's not going to completely upend everything and you know, risk it all. I think you don't mess with success, you know.
Right.
And the fact that he is a former champion and a great one at that, fantastic athlete. You know, he was rather small for a heavyweight, but fantastic footwork, great uchimata, great athlete. And that helps a lot because he's been there himself. He's been a double world champion. He's been an Olympic champion. He knows what it takes, you know. So I think that's always a positive thing. So it'll be interesting to watch what he does with the Japanese men's team and the success that he'll have in the coming years.
Right. One last follow-up questions with that, and then I guess we will end it there. How much pressure is on him to produce more gold medals?
I think tremendous pressure, right? Yeah, tremendous pressure because just because of the high benchmark that Inoue has set. You know, I mean, Inoue set out to achieve great things, and he did it. You know. And of course they were contemporaries, right? As competitors, they competed at the same time, and sometimes and in the All Japan Championships, he's beaten Inoue. Inoue's beaten him, you know, and so they were rivals and they were competitors and they were teammates. But you know, when Inoue was in his prime, Inoue got the minus 100 kilo slot, which was actually the slot that was more suitable for Suzuki than yeah. I mean, Suzuki, I'm sure, would have preferred minus 100 than plus 100 because he's not a very big player. But you know, Inoue was the more dominant player at the time, so he moved up to the heavyweight slot, and yeah, and so in a way he was. I mean, I won't say he was second fiddle to Inoue, but you know, Inoue got the prime slot, which was the minus 100. I'm sure both of them wanted that slot, but Inoue got that slot because Inoue was more dominant, more successful. And so he had to take the heavyweight slot, you know, and so there was that rivalry. So I'm sure he wants to outdo Inoue, as a coach, you know, or at least match, but if not outdo Inoue, you know. So I think tremendous pressure on him, but you know, he's got a great team to work with. I mean, he's got fantastic players, right? They're really good at, especially in the lightweights, right? The lightweight categories, the Japanese are unassailable, but Heavyweights is a little bit of a challenge. We've spoken about that. A little bit of a challenge. The Europeans and the rest of the world can give the Japanese a good fight in the heavier weight categories. In the lightweight categories, the Japanese really dominate. But in the heavier weights, he's got some work to do.
Well, Un, thank you very much for your time and answering all these questions. I have a ton more questions to ask you. Actually, I have so much more to ask, and I'm hoping that I can do a follow up with you in the coming couple of weeks or months or whenever you're available. Where can we? I know we've plugged it your website, Brad, but tell us where can we find you again?
Well, actually, where I'm most active is Facebook. So it's just facebook.com/Judo Crazy. That's that. But there's also judocrazy.com. Just go there. I also have a Patreon page, which is patreon.com/Judo Crazy. So you can find me on patreon.com/Judo Crazy, or you can find me on facebook.com/Judo Crazy, or you can find me on judocrazy.com itself. So these are the various places. But I'm most active on Facebook.
Right on. I appreciate reading your great articles. Continue producing more great content, and looking forward to our next chat.
Me too.
Thank
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.